We're being watched, we're being commented on, we're being judged by family, social media, across generations. It's all just too much. What really makes good parenting? Add that to the pressure that we have to be the perfect parent, and suddenly every choice feels like a test. Did I do too much? Am I not doing enough? Am I messing my kid up long term? Hi, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Ask Mom Parenting podcast, where we take the mystery and the yelling out of modern parenting and offer real life self-help for parents. I'm Sue, and with me is Randy. And whether you're deep in the toddler tantrums or navigating tween and teen drama, or somewhere in between, you're going to get clarity and actionable tools one episode at a time. So raise your hand if you've ever made a parenting decision that did not work out. Yeah. And if you're like me, not only are both hands in the air, but 1 foot, maybe 2 feet are in the air. But what surprised me most with raising kids? It was during my most busy parenting years, that I'd say maybe when the kids were 8 to 18, that it wasn't the big decisions that wore me down as much as it was the hundreds of tiny little decisions that I had to make daily, like the sheer minutia of it all, just all day, every day, nonstop decision making. Planning every meal, screen time, setting and keeping boundaries on screen times. Which activities are we going to do with the kids? What friends' houses are they going to go to? Who's going to pick them up? Social media. And then immediately pivoting into my home-based business, where I was making another round of completely different decisions. The decision fatigue was real, and it is real for all of us. I clearly remember feeling less like a parent and more like an air traffic controller, with my hands slicing through the air. Okay, stop. You next. What do you need? Okay, now what? Up to you now. Make it quick. Let's go. The upside was that my kids learned how to structure a concise sentence when they needed something from me. As parents, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we should parent, how to say the right thing and respond just the right way. We overthink because we care and we want to do the right thing, but it does come at a cost to us. On today's episode, how to stop decision fatigue in parents and stop second guessing ourselves, we break down a simple and effective way to make better decisions without reacting emotionally in the moment and without losing sight of the bigger picture. The goal is to stop mental spin so that you can keep momentum and stay grounded and trust yourself. Because decision fatigue isn't just annoying, it's quietly draining our energy and our patience and our confidence. Randy, do you have some stats? I think you had some stats that were going to back up this decision fatigue.
Yeah, very interesting when you dig into some research about this. So surveys are finding that most parents describe themselves as exhausted or overwhelmed, especially in the early years of parenting. And I know that probably comes to no surprise to anyone. The interesting thing that I have noticed, though, and it has been actually called out in a lot of the research since actually 2020, is it kind of started with the pandemic, but it never went away, that parents of kids of all ages started to report overwhelm and exhaustion just a bit more. There was a large survey in 2024 called the State of Parenting Survey. And on that one, 61% of parents reported exhaustion and 48% of parents reported overwhelm. Also in 2024, there was a research study at Ohio State, and about 62% of parents report feeling burnout and overwhelmed by parenting responsibilities. And one mother involved even described modern parenting as an endless series of choices. There's all these products. What school am I going to send my child to? What's the schedule should be? There's so many parenting philosophies and ways that I could try. And as a parent myself, I definitely can see this and feel this, myself at times. Parents today, we're just looking to be the best parents we can be. And technology is so great and information is great, but we're definitely suffering, I think, from information overload. And if you go down the rabbit hole long enough, it's going to be conflicting advice. The internet, social media, it kind of offers us an endless source of often contradictory guidance if you look long enough, making it harder to feel confident in decisions and easier to second guess them, especially long term. We're all feeling like there are too many choices, too little rest, and the constant pressure to get everything just right.
First of all, I read a stat that we make upwards of 30,000 decisions a day, which I mean, I guess I believe that, but 30,000 decisions. And also, I had a mom in one of my workshops who was telling me about how she just feels like Instagram, especially, she called out Instagram. There's so many choices of parenting and so much, it's just this, you don't know which way the wind is blowing on any given day as to what is the right thing to do. And therefore, that is why Ask Mom actually exists. And that's why I wrote my book, is because I am making parenting easier for parents. I've done it through all the phases and I am boiling it down. And I'm hoping that, what we talk about on our podcast, that it's making it easier for at least one parent. That's all I care about. How, if I can help one parent. But let's consider, why are parenting decisions so heavy for us? We've never really had so much on our plate that we do now, with so little support to navigate it all. The expectations feel sky high and the margin for error feels smaller and the stakes are so much more personal. Every day, parents are facing situations that we've never dealt with before. So every day is a brand new day. I'm experiencing something with, my 8-year-old or my 10-year-old. Like every day is a new day. I'm facing something that they're learning brand new for the first time that I'm having to revisit as an adult and a parent. And it's, we're parenting through things that we didn't even grow up with and we never had modeled for us. We're sidestepping technology at such a furious pace. Stranger danger no longer has clear edges. It's online, it's constant, and it's invisible. So social dynamics are now following kids home through their phones, and very little guidance exists on where to draw the line without feeling either careless or over controlling. This is just a taste of what we navigate daily. The logistics, the food, what to make for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, have all the right nutrients on hand. Bedtime, screen time, education, extracurriculars, technology and safety, long-term planning. What's the future fears that I have for my child, and, where are they going to end up as an adult, and is everything going to be okay? It's PhD level parenting without the degree, people. So of course, it all leads to overthinking and second guessing ourselves with all that we have to make decisions about. The nonstop decision load is a barrage with almost no pause. Plus, our decisions are more visible than ever. Like we've said, we're being watched, we're being commented on, we're being judged by family, social media, across generations. It's all just too much. What really makes good parenting? Add that to the pressure that we have to be the perfect parent, and suddenly every choice feels like a test. Did I do too much? Am I not doing enough? Am I messing my kid up long term? These are all valid concerns. Overthinking is not a personal flaw. It's a logical response to modern parenting.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you touched on some of that, because I was just like, oh my goodness, that was totally me. Like, especially when you talk about we're being watched, people are kind of, always in our face a little bit when we become parents, or kind of like always being judged. I really can't even go on social media without it's been happened with celebrities, but it's also happened with just people I know in real life, where they post a picture of their child and there's someone in the comments, oh, did you know you're not supposed to do that? Or this is unsafe, or this or that. I mean, it's just always, I know when I first became a parent, I felt like there was a microscope on me for sure. And, I think especially parents today, then you have people older than you, like your parents are involved, their grandparents, and there's some generational differences, and it can really all come to a head. So I definitely understand that. And I do think that feeling like that microscope is on us more today than ever, due to social media and this constant technology and sending pictures to people. You do it nicely to keep them updated, and then you're getting a comment back about what you're doing is wrong.
I would still have a flip phone if it weren't for my kids.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Those were kind of some more simple times, right?
Yes.
But yeah, I was just curious, from your perspective, what can we do today as parents? We're feeling stressed, we're feeling overwhelmed, we're feeling exhausted, making all of these, 30,000 decisions a day, like you mentioned. What can we do to help mitigate that a little bit?
Okay, so, overthinking is really just a side effect of us not having been taught a more clear way of making decisions. No one teaches us this stuff in school. If you don't have a decision-making process or an end goal in mind, then every choice will feel heavy. Every what if becomes a shoulda, woulda, coulda, and life starts to pile up. Then the self-questioning loop of indecision never really stops. That's why I'm excited for us to share today this very effective process so you can stop second guessing yourself and make the call and then get on with your day. And I call this process the dynamic decision making process. It's a tactical way of thinking. And I love the word tactical, not only because my husband's in the military and he has brainwashed me with terms, but it really fits here. So, tactical means skillful in the short term while still considering the bigger picture. It's being able to take a calculated short-term action while also considering your long-term goals to make your very best choice. When I sat down to write my parenting book, I was very intentional about all the chapters that I wrote about, covering all the situations that I know parents face every single day. And what kept coming up over and over was decision making, because decision making sits at the center of everything that we do with a busy family. It's getting back to that conversation with the 30,000 decisions that we make every day. No wonder we're so tired. The stakes feel so high and the what ifs are just accumulating. I realized something about the way that I make decisions, both at home and with running a family of 6, and as an entrepreneur calling my own shots. I have a very specific way of organizing my thinking so that I can make quality decisions quickly and keep moving. The dynamic decision-making process gives you the ability to make well-informed decisions, even in a fast-paced environment that's changing. And here's how it works. You run every decision through 2 lenses, a short-term lens and a long-term lens before you make your choice. So you zoom in to consider all the immediate needs for your decision. And then you zoom out to consider all the big picture needs that you need for that decision. And then you combine both of those takeaways to form your best choice. Most of us don't do this. Most of us live on one side or the other. We're either very comfortable in the details or we're very comfortable in the big picture. Very rarely do we combine intentionally both perspectives and both views. So we get stuck deciding from wherever feels easiest and most familiar, either being myopic or stuck in the micro moment or painting life with broad strokes, hoping that the long game just magically works out for us. Using the dynamic decision process, you'll get to the point where you will seamlessly switch between the zoomed in and the zoomed out perspective within moments. It's learning how to find and flex a whole new decision-making muscle. When you intentionally incorporate a zoomed in perspective and the zoomed out perspective, you're automatically considering more angles, more consequences, and more outcomes without overthinking. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Guess what else this process gives you? It's where self-awareness lives, as well as situational awareness and insight and foresight. This mental muscle, when activated, provides you with a 360-degree thinking process for your most decisive decision, so you can decide with all the best information that you have at that time. You can forget about second guessing because you won't need to do that anymore. I know this might sound a little confusing, but let's start with an example. I have a mom that was in one of my recent workshops, and I was giving this talk on decision making, and she wanted to go through a personal example of her daughter's 8 and she wanted to go to sleepaway camp, and her husband were having a really hard time deciding. So let's go through this and see how it works. If we only zoom in, all we're going to see is the short term. What if our daughter gets sick? What if she cries at night? What if I feel guilty dropping her off? In that micro moment, in that short-term perspective, everything is feeling urgent. It's emotional and heavy in that zoomed in perspective. Now, if you only zoom out, you can minimize that moment and say, she'll be fine. It's good for kids. This builds resilience. So that's the big picture. I'm not really thinking about all the little details, I'm just thinking broad stroke, everything's fine. The big picture can have me skipping over the real age appropriate concerns. Using the dynamic decision process blends both perspectives for your most ideal decision. And once you get the hang of this, it can literally be done in a minute or two, and then you move on. So you zoom in and ask yourself, is she emotionally ready? How does she handle being away overnight? What support does she get at this camp if she's struggling? And then if you zoom out, you're going to ask other questions like, what skills do I want her to build long term? Do I want her to have confidence and independence and trust in herself to go do cool new things and have new experiences? Is this a step toward the kind of capable person that I'm raising? So in the zoomed out perspective, I'm thinking about my goals, my overall goals for every experience that I'm helping make, for my daughter. When you blend these two lenses, the decision gets a lot more clear. Maybe the answer is yes with a shorter camp session. Is that available? Let's ask. Maybe it's yes with preparation and a plan. So maybe I decide she's on the cusp, and now I've decided I'm going to take time for training. She's on the bubble. We think she can go and she can handle it. She's independent. She feels like she can do sleepovers. She's not struggling when she's away from us. So now I'm going to just take time for training. I'm going to prepare her for what it's like to be away. What are her options? Can she write us notes? Can she take a certain stuffed animal? Like, this is now my preparation. These are things that I'm deciding by blending both of these perspectives. Or maybe she's not ready yet, and that's still a strong, informed decision. This process forces us to look in both directions and brings the full scope of factors into my decision process. It eliminates the spiraling later and the guilt and second guessing, because now I have a much more thought out and thorough plan of action. And action is what stops us from second guessing, because we're taking a well-informed action. Another way to kind of look at this is that big picture, long-term thinking is very directional and it's very practical. And short-term thinking is the micro moment where you're a little bit more analytical and situational. So you can see how one or the other itself will not give me my best decision. But if I can apply that lens to both in my moment, I'm going to come up with a decision that is asking more deep questions about this experience to help me come up with what's going to work for my daughter. Our best decisions need both perspectives, not just one undercooked choice. Because here's what happens otherwise. If you're only zoomed out, not much will actually change. And if you're only zoomed in, then everything feels really urgent and exhausting. And what if you're a parent who needs validation from others and friends and family, and other parents? Then you're going to stay stuck in that indecision loop. This process empowers you to be the leader in your home. Consider every pro and con and then choose the best for your family and move on. It also works for everyday decisions. Like, say, for example, have you ever had those people that like lose their keys all the time, and every time they come in, they're so stuck in the micro moment, they're living in that moment, they put their keys down and then they're moving on to the next thing because there's no big picture going, activated at all. And they put their keys down, and then every time you want to leave, they're spending 5 minutes looking for their keys in their wallet. So that's a problem. It's wasting my time. I am wondering where the hell I put everything. So now if I apply the big picture to this scenario, I go, oh, why don't I just hang something in the laundry room where I have my wallet and my keys? And now I don't have to keep doing that. So my big picture perspective is applying to this frustrating micro moment. Another example would be, say your kids come home from school and they're throwing their coat and their backpack on the ground every day. And now every day you're yelling, guys, pick up your coat. You're always leaving your coat on the floor. Get your backpack. Where do they belong? So instead of every day yelling at my kids repeatedly over the same thing, now I apply my big picture perspective and I go, what can I do to stop this every day from me having to yell and have exhaustion and frustration? My big picture perspective tells me, just get a coat rack. And now I could even take it a step further, get the coat rack, let the kids decorate it. Maybe they paint it. Now they have some stake in this coat rack. And now when they come in and they drop their coat and they put it on the floor, all I have to do is go, hey guys, where do those go? And I don't have to yell, and I don't have to keep experiencing the frustration and the yelling and that moment of anger. I can apply the big picture and come up with a solution long term. So this dynamic decision process is a very effective way to stop decision fatigue, have a 360-degree perspective on the decision you have to make so that you can make the most informed decision as quickly as possible.
A question just popped into my head as we're talking about all of this. So, example for me is I have an 8-year-old son and he just got an iPad for Christmas. And I do find that I kind of, especially in times of stress, like instead of like maybe working through an issue, I default to, if you don't do XYZ, we're taking away the screen time. So example is there's always this like in the morning, very hard to get him going and things like that. And we've never been late for anything, but there's always this worry like if he doesn't pick up the pace, like we're gonna miss the bus. So I have found myself resorting to saying like, hey, if you miss the bus, you're not going to get screen time later. And hearing you talk about this process, it seems like, are there ways to use this process in situations like that? So instead of like defaulting to almost like a punishment per se and taking something away, I use this process to help me work through like a morning routine.
Yes, I love it. I love it you're asking because this process is literally activating a decision-making muscle that you didn't know you had. And once you learn how to apply the micro moment and the big picture to every stressful situation or whenever you're feeling overwhelmed, you always come up with a beautiful answer. So in your case, so say you're jumping into the iPad game and now your screen time is going to be occupying your day. So instead of thinking in terms of a punishment of that moment, like how am I going to get to the bus on time? That's the micro moment that you're in. In the overall scheme of things, this kid needs to learn balance. He needs to learn how to manage his time. He needs to learn how to delay gratification because, hey, this is like addicting. This is really fun. What big picture lens can you apply to this iPad and to the time that he's spending? So again, I'm always trying to make parenting processes really easy for parents. So how can I apply that big picture? I'm going to say, how do I structure this so that he's in charge of his time on the iPad? And I have an earned access program or process that I talk about where, we can apply this system to where he does certain things around the house, or he gets up on time, or he gets to the bus on time. That's 2 minutes of screen time. So the big picture tells me my goal is to teach him that action creates the good stuff. So you have to have the discipline, and when you do the right things, then you earn the screen time, which is how life is. And he's not too young to know that. The big picture might tell you, I'm just going to eliminate time in the morning that he can't be on the iPad because it's holding up the time that he's holding up the family and getting to the bus. So that's a problem. How do I avoid dealing with this every morning to where I'm reminding and stressing and getting everybody else involved in this process? The big picture tells me how to get rid of this so that it's not an everyday problem. So you can decide, with you and your husband, what works for us. Do we just take the iPad away in the morning so he doesn't have access because we're going to explain to him, hey, we have to get to the bus on time. And until you can manage your time, we're going to take it off the table for mornings. Or we come up with the earned access process, which I think I'll do a podcast on the earned access because it's really good stuff. But for this topic, he has to earn the access. And you explain it to him. You have a little training. You do a chart. He can decorate the chart. He's young enough to get excited about stickers and all that. And you can tell him for every day that you get to the bus on time and that you're not, hung up on your iPad, 3 minutes. Don't overdo the minutes. That's the one thing I tell parents. But we're all tempted to be like 10 minutes of free. No, because they're going to be going around doing all sorts of chores. You'll be surprised. But you can say in the morning, we get to the bus, we're out the door on time. Guess what? That's 3 minutes after you get back from school. So it's earned, it's tied to the action, you're creating accountability. And that's the beautiful part about the dynamic decision process, because just the micro moment is everyday repeated frustration. Get to the bus, you're on the computer too much, every day. Now we're applying the big picture. And we're saying, okay, we're zooming out, and how do I get this off my plate every morning? And that's how. So we come up with a bunch of other ideas, and then we get the kid involved in it, and he gets buy-in and all of that. So hopefully, does that sense at all for you?
Makes sense.
Good. So decision fatigue can be fixed with a better decision process, a system used with intention in advance. And do you want to know the best part? This dynamic decision process does not just build decisive parents. Once you get the hang of how to get both perspectives to make your best choice, it's transferable and teachable as a skill to your kids. And then they learn how to make their best, most informed decisions after you're not in the room. If this way of thinking resonates for you and you want help applying this to your real life, especially when decisions are emotionally charged or you need help to stop yelling, that's exactly what my Fight Free Parenting course will teach. My goal, like I've said, is to make parenting easier. So with repeatable methods for every age and phase, once you learn these, they can be adapted to every parenting situation. This course is self-paced and it teaches you the process that stops yelling, and it can change your life. Head to askmomparenting.com/get help fight free parenting. And if you subscribed to the podcast on either Spotify, Apple, YouTube, it would mean so much to us so that we know that this information is helping you with your parenting. Thank you so much for listening and happy parenting.